I've been a detective with the Fairfax County Police Department for 22 years. I've seen the good, the bad, and the downright evil that hides behind white fences and Christmas lights. But nothing prepared me for the case on Pine Street, a place so normal it could have been a postcard for suburban America. It started on a humid August morning in 2018. Dispatch sent me a call at 7:42 a.m. Possible domestic disturbance, 1147 Pine Street. Neighbor reports screaming and loud bangs, unknown injuries. That neighborhood was one of those gated communities where everyone waves, but no one really knows each other. The kind where appearances matter more than truth. When I pulled up, the house looked perfect. Trimmed hedges, polished car, a flag gently waving on the porch. But the front door was open, and that's never a good sign. I entered with my hand on my weapon. Inside, the air smelled of metal and lemon cleaner. That sharp contrast you only smell when someone tries to wipe away blood. In the living room, a woman sat on the couch, trembling. Blonde hair, early 40s, wearing a blood-stained nightgown. Her eyes were vacant, like she wasn't there anymore. I'd seen that look before, the 1,000-yard stare of someone whose world just collapsed. "Ma'am," I said softly, "I'm Detective Hayes. Can you tell me what happened?" She blinked twice before whispering, "He tried to leave." Behind her, the hallway led to a kitchen, spotless except for one thing. A man's body on the floor, face down, blood pooling under his head. The back of his skull had a single gunshot wound, a .38 caliber, close range. The woman's name was Laura Bennett. The victim was her husband, Richard Bennett, a 47-year-old real estate broker known around town for his million-dollar listings and charity galas. Together they had one teenage daughter, Emily, who was at a sleepover that night. As forensic techs swarmed the scene, I noticed something odd. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no struggle, only one thing out of place: a packed suitcase by the door. Men's clothes, passports, and a plane ticket to Cancun, booked for one passenger, Richard Bennett. "Looks like he really was trying to leave," my partner, Detective Moore, muttered. Laura sat quietly as paramedics checked her. No visible injuries, no bruises. When we asked where the gun was, she said, "It's in the kitchen drawer." I didn't mean to. Classic words. But I'd heard them too many times to take them at face value. At the station, Laura's story unfolded slowly. "We were arguing," she said. "He told me he was done, that he was leaving me for someone else. I tried to stop him. He pushed me. I don't even remember pulling the trigger." Her hands shook, but her tone was almost rehearsed, calm in places where grief should have cracked through. That's when the first layer of truth started peeling. The gun she claimed was hers wasn't registered to her. It was registered to a man named Eli Crawford, a contractor who'd worked on their house renovation 2 years earlier. "Who's Eli?" I asked. "Just someone who helped us remodel the kitchen," she said, looking away. The next day we visited Eli's last known address, a rundown trailer outside Manassas. He wasn't there, but the neighbor said, "Haven't seen him in months. Heard he went south." We dug deeper. Richard had recently taken out a life insurance policy, $1.2 million, naming Laura as the sole beneficiary, signed just 3 weeks before his death. But there was more. Phone records showed Laura had been in frequent contact with Eli Crawford, hundreds of calls over 6 months, many late at night, some just minutes before Richard's estimated time of death. By day 3, the picture was no longer one of domestic tragedy. It was greed, betrayal, and premeditation, painted under the disguise of grief. When we confronted Laura with the call logs, she broke down. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," she whispered. "He promised me." "Eli?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "He said Richard didn't deserve to live that life, that once he was gone, we could start over. I've heard love make people do stupid things. But this wasn't love. This was desperation mixed with greed, the kind that festers when lies start paying better than the truth. A week later, we found Eli Crawford in a motel in Richmond, registered under a fake name. He didn't resist arrest. In his car trunk, we found a burner phone, cash, and an unregistered .38 revolver, wiped clean, but ballistic tests confirmed it was the murder weapon. Under interrogation, Eli cracked faster than I expected. He claimed Laura had begged him to help scare her husband, not kill him, said the plan went wrong, but text messages told a different story. One from Laura read, "Make sure it looks like I had no choice. After tonight, we're free." Another from Eli, "Plane tickets ready, you'll get what you deserve." It was the perfect suburban facade, until it wasn't. Two people who thought they could rewrite their lives with blood and lies. The trial drew huge media attention. The Pine Street Affair, they called it. Laura played the grieving widow, but the jury saw through it. In March 2020, both Laura Bennett and Eli Crawford were convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She got life without parole. He got 35 years for cooperating. Emily Bennett, their daughter, was placed in foster care. I visited her once months later. She was quiet, polite, and carried a small photo of her parents smiling, a memory of before everything fell apart. She asked me, "Do you think my mom ever loved my dad?" I told her the truth. Yes, but love can die the same way people do, slowly and sometimes by someone's own hand. Cases like Pine Street don't fade, they stick with you, because behind every perfect house in America, there's a story. And some of them are written in blood. 2 weeks after Laura Bennett's arrest, I sat in my office staring at the caseboard, photos, timelines, text logs, flight tickets. It was all there, neatly pinned together like a jigsaw puzzle of deceit. But something about it still gnawed at me. Eli Crawford's confession had closed the case, at least on paper. But in my gut, I knew Laura hadn't told the full story. Every time I replayed the night of August 14th, details didn't quite add up. The angle of the gunshot, the timing of the 911 call, the missing 5 minutes before officers arrived. And then there was money. In every murder born from greed, the paper trail always leads to the real motive. I requested Richard Bennett's financial statements again. His account showed multiple transfers, small but regular, to an unknown business labeled L&C Holdings. When I dug deeper, I discovered it was a shell company created just 6 months prior. And guess who was listed as a silent partner? Laura Bennett. She had been quietly funneling funds out of their joint savings, disguising them as investment expenses. By the time of Richard's death, she had drained nearly $180,000, enough to start a new life, maybe even enough to buy freedom. I visited her in jail the next morning. She looked smaller than before, wrapped in that same orange jumpsuit like it had swallowed her whole. Her eyes were different, colder, sharper. "You've been busy," she said before I could even sit down. "Digging where you shouldn't." I leaned forward. "Why did you need the shell company, Laura?" She smiled faintly. "Because Richard didn't give me what I deserved. 20 years of my life to build his empire, and he wanted to walk away with someone half my age. I wasn't going to let him." There it was, the truth hiding behind her carefully measured words. I pushed a photo across the table. "This is the woman he was leaving you for." She looked at it, and something flickered in her eyes. "She's a child." The woman in the photo was Jessica Lane, 26, a real estate assistant at Richard's firm. No criminal record, no signs of involvement. Just a young woman caught in the storm of someone else's choices. But Laura wasn't done talking. "You know what's funny, Detective? Everyone thinks I killed him because of love, but it wasn't love. It was about control. He controlled everything, the house, the money, even my choices. For once, I wanted to decide how things ended." Her honesty was disarming. Most killers cling to denial, but Laura seemed proud, almost relieved, like confessing gave her a new kind of freedom, Later that day, I visited Jessica Lane at her apartment in Arlington. She was visibly nervous, shaking as she opened the door. "I already told the other officers everything," she said. "I just want to clarify a few things," I replied. "How long had you and Richard been seeing each other?" Her eyes welled up. "About 7 months. He said his marriage was over. He promised he'd file for divorce after summer." I nodded. "Did he ever mention money problems? Or that Laura might have found out?" Jessica shook her head. "He was secretive, but not scared. He said he'd booked a trip for both of us, to Mexico. We were supposed to leave that week. When he didn't show up, I thought..." Her voice cracked. "I thought he changed his mind. But that ticket, the one I found at the crime scene, was only in his name. No second seat. That meant he wasn't planning on taking her after all." Back at the precinct, I replayed the evidence like a movie in my mind. Richard was leaving, but not for Jessica. He was running from something else. I had one last lead, an email found on Richard's laptop that was never sent. It was addressed to his lawyer. Subject line: urgent, need to change policy. The draft read, "I want to remove Laura as the beneficiary of my life insurance. I believe she's planning something. Please process before Friday." That draft was saved the day before his death. I remember sitting there, reading that over and over, the chill in my spine creeping higher each time. Richard Bennett knew he was in danger, and no one listened. I brought the email to the prosecutor. "We need to reopen the investigation," I said. He sighed. "You already got 2 confessions. What more do you want?" "The truth," I replied, "because this story doesn't end with a jealous wife. There's more buried here." He hesitated but finally agreed. "You've got 72 hours. After that, we're closing the file." The next morning, I went back to the Bennett house. Crime scene tape still fluttering in the breeze. The house was quiet, eerie. It smelled like emptiness. In the garage, I found something the forensics team missed: a burned USB drive wedged behind a shelf. It was half melted, but our tech guys managed to recover fragments. Inside were bank records, offshore accounts tied to L&C Holdings, and video footage from the home's hidden cameras. One clip showed Laura and Eli 2 nights before the murder. They were arguing. Laura: "You said you'd take care of it." Eli: "Not yet. He's pulling money out. If he leaves before..." Laura: "Then make sure he doesn't leave." That footage sealed it. Premeditation, motive, and manipulation, all in 17 seconds. When I brought it to Laura the next day, she didn't deny it. She just leaned back in her chair and whispered, "You think you know me, detective, but you have no idea what people like him do to women like me." "Then tell me," I said. She looked me straight in the eyes. "He wasn't just leaving me for her, he was leaving me with nothing. Every penny we made was under his name. He said I'd go back to being a nobody. I made sure he didn't get the chance." For a long moment, I didn't respond, because deep down I understood what she meant: the quiet kind of rage that builds after years of control, betrayal, and fear. But murder isn't justice. It's just another kind of prison. As I walked out of the interrogation room, she said something that still echoes in my head today. "Everyone thinks monsters live in the dark, but sometimes they live right next to you, mowing the same lawn every Saturday." And she wasn't wrong. When I walked back into the precinct that evening, the whole place smelled like stale coffee and fluorescent light, the kind of smell that clings to you when you've been chasing ghosts too long. Laura Bennett's confession should have been enough to close this case. The DA wanted headlines: "Suburban wife confesses to husband's murder." But my gut wouldn't let me rest. There was still something rotten beneath the evidence. That USB drive, the one we'd recovered from the Bennett garage, had fragments of encrypted files. The text told me most of it was unreadable, but one document stood out. Its name: Our Project Hachi Files. When I opened the partial recovery, it wasn't bank statements or emails. It was a list. dates, locations, initials, and wire amounts. Transfers totaling over $2.7 million. None of it matched Laura's accounts. None of it matched Richard's either. That meant someone else was in this. Someone both of them were connected to. I sent the partial list to our financial crimes unit. Within an hour, an analyst called back. "Detective, these transfers trace back to a construction investment firm, Miller and Rhodes Development. They went under 2 years ago in a fraud case. But get this, Eli Crawford used to work there." That was the missing piece. Eli wasn't just Laura's lover. He was her co-conspirator. And they weren't just trying to escape Richard. They were trying to cover a massive fraud that Richard had unknowingly helped fund. The next morning, I drove to the old Miller and Rhodes office downtown. The place was boarded up, dusty, dead. A single janitor sat by the front door, smoking in silence. When I showed him my badge, he muttered, "You cops still chasing that mess?" "What mess?" I asked. "The one they buried? That firm was just a front. Money laundering, offshore accounts, bogus projects. They took everyone's savings and ran. Heard one of their clients got whacked a while back. Some rich guy from Arlington." My chest tightened. "You mean Richard Bennett?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's the one. Guess karma caught up, huh?" It wasn't karma. It was greed. And it had worn a perfect suburban smile. Back at the precinct, I pulled Eli Crawford's file. His employment history matched. Project manager at Miller and Rhodes. Fired just before the firm collapsed. His bank showed no assets, no job, no car. Yet he'd wired thousands to Laura in the months before Richard's death. They'd planned everything. The affair, the emotional manipulation, even the staged break-in that went wrong. But something shifted in those final hours. I drove to see Eli at county jail. He'd been quiet since his arrest, but when he saw me walk in, his smirk faded. "You already got what you wanted," he said. "She confessed." "She confessed to part of it," I replied. "But I don't think you realize what you walked into, Eli. Laura wasn't trying to protect you. She was using you." He looked at me confused. "What are you talking about?" I slid a copy of the recovered list across the table. "These wire transfers, they're all linked to your old firm. You and Laura used Richard's accounts to hide embezzled funds. She made sure every paper trail pointed to you." He stared at the page, his lips trembling. "That can't be..." But it could, and it was. "Laura needed someone disposable," I continued. "Someone she could blame when it all burned down. You were the perfect candidate. Broke, in love, desperate." His hands clenched. "She said we'd leave together. Start fresh." I leaned in. "She never planned to. She wanted your silence, not your company." He looked down for a long time, then whispered, "There's something you don't know." "What's that?" "The night Richard died. I wasn't there when she called. She told me she'd handle it herself, said he was drunk and violent. By the time I got there, he was already on the floor." "So you didn't shoot him?" He hesitated. "No, I moved the body. I cleaned the prints. I panicked. But she was calm, too calm." That confession was enough to shake the foundation of our case. If Eli didn't pull the trigger, then who did? I spent the next 48 hours re-examining the forensics. The bullet was from Richard's own gun, but there were no fingerprints on the grip. The safe where it was kept showed no forced entry. That meant the killer had the code. Richard changed the code weekly, except the week before he died. That week, the code was set by his assistant, Jessica Lane. I called her in for another interview. This time she didn't look nervous. She looked terrified. "Jessica," I said gently, "I know this is hard, but I need to ask, did anyone else know the safe code?" She hesitated. "I only gave it to Richard, but..." "But what?" "He asked me to send it to his wife, too. He said she was handling insurance papers." There it was again. Insurance. The same word in that unsent email. When I showed Jessica the draft message, her face went pale. He sent me one just like that, she whispered, the morning before he died. He said if anything happened to him, I should tell you to check the garage. The garage? Yes. He said there was something hidden behind the fuse box. My pulse kicked up. I drove straight back to Pine Street, pushed open the dusty garage door, and pulled the metal panel from the wall. Behind it, taped to the concrete, was a small black envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter and a flash drive. The letter was short. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. Laura isn't who she says she is. She's been stealing from me for years and with Eli, but it goes deeper. She's connected to the Rhodes fraud. I have proof on this drive. Please, whoever finds this, don't let her bury it. When the text loaded the flash drive, it contained folders labeled L&C accounts, Rhodes files, and one titled simply Laura. Inside that folder were photographs, screenshots of emails, offshore transfers, and finally, a scanned marriage certificate. But it wasn't hers and Richard's. It was Laura Bennett and Charles Rhodes, the same Rhodes who owned the fraudulent company. She wasn't just involved, she was the architect. The entire operation, from the fraud to her husband's murder, had been designed to erase her past and steal the fortune she'd helped create. When I went to see her one last time, she was sitting alone, calm as ever. "You found it," she said. "Yes." She smiled faintly. "Then you understand why I did it." I looked at her through the glass. "No, Laura, I understand how you did it. Why, that's between you and whatever conscience you've got left." She tilted her head. "Conscience? You think I could survive with one?" And just like that, she turned away. That was the moment I realized the truth about people like her. Killers don't always wear blood on their hands. Sometimes it's hidden beneath designer rings and perfect smiles. The courthouse smelled like cold marble and guilt. Every sound echoed. The clack of heels, the shuffle of paper, the murmurs that followed Laura Bennett wherever she went. By the time her trial began, the story had already exploded across the country. Suburban queen turns killer. The woman who outsmarted everyone until she didn't. It was the kind of story America couldn't look away from. Wealth, betrayal, and the illusion of a perfect life, ripped apart by greed. I sat near the back of the courtroom that morning, my notebook open, though I barely wrote anything. I'd already memorized every lie, every twist, every secret. But I wanted to see her face. Not the one from her mugshot, not the one from the interviews, but this one, the real Laura, under oath. She walked in wearing a tailored black suit that didn't belong to her. She'd borrowed it from the jail's special cases wardrobe, the kind meant to make killers look respectable. Her hair was pinned up neatly, her expression soft, controlled. For a moment, you could almost believe she was innocent. The prosecutor started strong, his voice sharp. Laura Bennett wasn't a victim. She was the architect of every piece of this crime, the fraud, the affair, the murder. He moved through the evidence like a surgeon. The shell company, the secret marriage to Charles Rhodes, the offshore accounts, and the footage. That 17-second clip where she told Eli to make sure he doesn't leave. Each piece landed like a hammer. When it was the defense's turn, her attorney, sleek, confident, and utterly soulless, painted a different picture. He described Laura as a woman, trapped by control, gaslighted by a husband who stole her freedom, and manipulated by a man who exploited her vulnerability. It was a desperate attempt to twist her into a victim again. When she finally took the stand, the room went silent. Cameras clicked. Every eye was on her. She began slowly, her voice calm. "I didn't plan to kill him," she said. "I just wanted him to see what he'd done, to know that he couldn't destroy me and walk away." The prosecutor leaned in. "So, Mrs. Bennett, when you created L&C Holdings, that wasn't fraud?" "It was a mistake," she said. "Charles Rhodes told me it was legal. And when you funneled your husband's money into those accounts, he never let me have anything in my name. I thought I thought I deserved something after 20 years. And when you shot him? Her voice broke. He was going to ruin me. He said he'd expose everything. I just wanted to scare him. I didn't mean to pull the trigger. Her words hit the air heavy and hollow. I'd heard the same tone 100 times, guilt pretending to be remorse. Then came the moment that changed everything. The prosecutor pulled out the flash drive we'd recovered from behind the fuse box. He displayed a still frame from one of the files, an email from Laura to Charles Rhodes. He's transferring the insurance policy tomorrow. If we don't act, we lose everything. The timestamp was 1 hour before Richard's death. The courtroom erupted. Even the judge's gavel couldn't silence the gasps. Laura froze, her mask slipping for the first time. The faint tremor in her jaw gave her away. "You recognize this message?" the prosecutor asked. Her lawyer objected, overruled. Laura exhaled slowly. "Yes, but I didn't mean it like that." He leaned closer. "Then what did you mean, Mrs. Bennett?" Silence. That was the moment she realized there was no escape left, no way to charm her way out, no one left to manipulate. The next day, the defense tried to spin a plea bargain. Second-degree murder, 25 years with parole. The DA rejected it. We wanted the full truth, not a deal. When the verdict came, the courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. On the charge of first-degree murder, guilty. On the charge of financial fraud, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, guilty. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't even blink. She just turned to me, the only person who'd followed her story from start to end, and gave the faintest smile. It wasn't defiance, it was satisfaction. Because even in defeat, Laura Bennett had achieved what she always wanted: control. She had everyone in that room dancing around her story, dissecting her emotions, remembering her name. She was infamous now, eternal, in her own twisted way. After the trial, the world moved on, like it always does. New headlines replaced hers, new crimes took over the news cycle. But I couldn't move on, not yet. A few months later, I received an anonymous envelope at the precinct. No return address. Inside, a single photo. Laura in prison, standing in the yard, surrounded by women who looked at her like she was royalty. On the back of the photo, one sentence was written in neat cursive: "You can't cage a woman who already lived her punishment." No signature. But I knew her handwriting. It made me wonder, was she truly remorseful? Or had she found a new stage to perform on, this time inside those walls? I decided to visit her one last time. The guards led me through the gates, past layers of wire and concrete. She was waiting in the visitor room, same calm posture, same piercing eyes. "You got my letter?" she said. It wasn't a letter, it was a photo. She smiled. "Everything's a message if you know how to read it." I sat down. "Why send it?" "Because I wanted you to understand," she said softly. "Everyone wants to think I'm a monster. Maybe I am, but I didn't start that way. I just learned how to survive in a world that rewards monsters." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. "You destroyed lives, Laura," I said. "You could have walked away." "Walked away to what?" she asked. A quiet house, empty bank account, and another man laughing at how he played me? "No, detective. I chose to end it before they could." Her tone was calm, but her eyes, they were endless, hollow. "You think you won?" I asked. She tilted her head. "Winning is a matter of perspective. You're still here talking about me. That means I still matter." And just like that, she stood up and walked away. The guard led her back, and I watched as that black suit disappeared down the hallway, swallowed by concrete and steel. That night, I drove home past the same rows of suburban houses, clean lawns, golden lights, kids on bicycles, the kind of life the Bennetts had pretended to live. I realized something then. Evil doesn't always break into your home. Sometimes it's built inside it, piece by piece, smile by smile. And behind every perfect marriage, every friendly wave from a neighbor, there might be a secret waiting to detonate. Laura Bennett wasn't the first. She won't be the last, but I'll remember her. Not because she fooled the world, but because she reminded me that monsters don't come from darkness. They grow in comfort. When I returned to Pine Street 6 months later, the manicured lawns looked the same, calm, green, perfect. But beneath that calm, the air still carried the whisper of something broken. The Miller's house stood empty, a for sale sign tilted in the front yard, swaying gently in the wind like it was tired too. The trial had ended 3 days earlier. Allison Miller, the grieving widow, the woman who had cried on every camera and every neighbor's shoulder, was sentenced to life without parole. And yet, even after months of evidence, hours of testimony, and my own endless nights piecing the story together, something still didn't sit right with me. The beginning of the end. It started during cross-examination. Allison sat there in her gray sweater, hands folded neatly, eyes hollow. The defense attorney painted her as a victim, emotionally abused, trapped, desperate. But when the prosecution brought up the hidden life insurance policy, her mask cracked for the first time. That's when she said something that didn't fit. "They told me it would look like an accident," she blurted out before her lawyer could stop her. They. That single word gnawed at me. The case had been built around Allison, the careful wife who poisoned her husband slowly over weeks. But now, they hinted at something else, someone else. The breakthrough. After the sentencing, I went back to the evidence room. Maybe I was just restless, maybe obsessed. But I started to comb through the documents again, her emails, bank statements, insurance paperwork. That's when I found a series of small transfers, $600 here, $450 there, all sent to an account in the name of M. Carter. M. Carter wasn't in the case file, wasn't on any witness list, so I followed the money. M. Carter turned out to be Melissa Carter, a nurse's aide who worked at the very clinic where Daniel Miller, the victim, had received his routine wellness checks. A few calls later, I found out Melissa had quit her job 2 weeks after Daniel's death and moved to another state. That's not the behavior of someone with nothing to hide. The interview. It took me another month to track her down, a small town outside Baton Rouge, Louisiana. When I showed up at her doorstep, she looked terrified before I even said a word. "I'm not here to arrest you," I said softly, "but if you don't talk, someone else will." She hesitated, then let me in. Her apartment was sparse, just a couch, a coffee table, and an oxygen plant by the window. No photos, no clutter. When I asked her about Allison Miller, she stared at the floor. "Allison, she wasn't supposed to go that far," she whispered. "What do you mean, that far?" Melissa took a shaky breath. "It started as a favor. She came to the clinic crying one day, said her husband was controlling, said he had money she couldn't touch. I told her about supplements, things that could weaken him a bit. Natural stuff, nothing fatal. But then she started asking about stronger options. I said no, but she found her own way. I asked her about the payments. She said they were hush money. Allison didn't want anyone knowing she'd been asking for chemicals that could mimic liver failure. By the time I left that apartment, I realized something chilling. Allison hadn't acted alone at first, but when things escalated, she made sure she would be the only one standing. The confession tape. A month later, her lawyer called. "She wants to talk," he said. We met in the county jail's interview room. Just me, her, and a reporter. Allison looked older, thinner. Her eyes had lost their sharpness. When I asked her why she wanted to confess, she smiled faintly. "Because everyone keeps saying I'm a monster," she said. "But monsters don't cry themselves to sleep." I let her talk. She said Daniel had discovered her affair, not with Melissa, but with a man she'd met online. He was a supposed financial advisor who promised her a new start, but it turned out he was a scammer. By the time she realized